trans teen walks into a bank, only to be treated like a fraud. But when power and prejudice collide, who really ends up exposed? Let us know in the comments section below where you're watching from today. Hailey Morgan clutched the crisp envelope in her hands, the flap sealed tight with all her hopes inside. $5,000 in bills, neatly stacked, wrapped with a small elastic band and a sticky note that read in her own careful handwriting, "For college." Her fingers, pink-polished and trembling slightly, didn't loosen their grip as she stepped through the revolving doors of Brickwell Bank. The air inside buzzed with that dull, grown-up hum of clipped conversations, computer clicks, and heels on tile. It should have been just another Saturday. It should have been easy. Hailey, 13 years old, white, and proudly transgender, had done everything right. She saved from tutoring other students after school. She won part of a state scholarship from an LGBTQ+ essay contest, and she'd even convinced her dad to match her contributions if she reached the halfway mark herself. And now here she was, a girl with a goal and the money to prove it. But none of that seemed to matter when the teller glanced up and froze. "Next," the woman called out, eyes flitting to Hailey's shoulder-length, honey-blonde hair and delicate frame. Hailey stepped forward with a polite smile, her shoes squeaking just a little as she reached the window. She slid the envelope toward the glass tray. "I'd like to deposit this into my savings account," she said, her voice soft, nervous but steady. The teller's eyes narrowed. Her name tag read Maureen. She picked up the envelope but didn't open it. Instead, she tilted her head and asked, "Where are your parents?" "I don't need them to deposit my own money," Hailey replied, blinking. "The account is under my name, Hailey Morgan." Maureen's smile thinned. She tapped at her keyboard, lips pursed. "And Hailey Morgan is your name?" "Yes, ma'am." "Her name, her truth." The teller paused. Then, "You got ID?" Hailey swallowed. She did, but she hated this part. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the plastic card her dad had helped her get after her name change went through last spring. Maureen held it up, squinting. She stared, then blinked, then stared again. "You sure this is you?" she asked, voice louder now. The man in line behind Hailey looked up from his phone. A woman 3 places down leaned in. "Yes," Hailey said, "that's me." Maureen's mouth pressed into a hard line. She tapped more keys. "It says here, you're 13. "I am," Hailey said, heart thudding in her chest. "That's my account. I opened it 2 years ago when I was still using my old name, but my dad updated it after the paperwork." "So, you're saying you changed your name?" Maureen's voice was sharp now, too sharp. "And you just happened to have $5,000 in cash today?" The envelope was still on the counter. "Yes," Hailey said again, her hands tightening into fists. Maureen's eyes darted to the security guard. "Can you hold a moment?" she said, not to Hailey, but to the guard behind the rope. "We may have a situation." Hailey froze. A situation. Her throat tightened. She could feel the heat rising to her face, 100 eyes suddenly on her, a weight she never asked for pressing down on her chest. This wasn't just about money. It never was. Maureen didn't see a girl with ambition. She saw someone to be suspicious of. She saw the trance before the teen. "Wait," Hailey said, her voice catching. "I didn't do anything wrong." But the guard was already walking over. A bank manager, middle-aged, graying, tired-looking, stepped out from the glass office, adjusting his tie like this was just a minor inconvenience on a slow afternoon. Maureen leaned in to whisper something to him. He glanced at Hailey, then frowned. "We need to verify a few things," he said, holding out a hand for the envelope. "Can you wait in that room over there?" Hailey looked at the door he pointed to, a small side office, glass walls, everyone would see. "No," she said, trying to stand her ground. "Why? This is my account. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm—" "A child," the manager cut in, with a lot of cash and a changed name. "We're just doing our job, miss." The word miss felt sharp, icy, like he didn't really mean it, like it came with air quotes. Hailey felt her lip quiver. She reached for her phone, heart pounding now. She typed one word into the group chat she had with her dad. "Help." Then she slid the phone back into her bag and stared down the manager with everything she had left. She wasn't going to cry. Not here. She wasn't going to shrink. She'd done that too many times before. Let them look, let them whisper, let them call her whatever they wanted under their breath. Because she knew exactly who she was. Hailey Morgan. Trans girl, daughter, fighter. And they had no idea who they were messing with. The office smelled like old printer paper and weak coffee. Hailey sat on the edge of a stiff, fake leather chair, her legs crossed tightly, backpack still slung over one shoulder. Her eyes flicked from the framed certificate on the wall to the ticking clock above the door. Every second stretched like an hour. The bank manager hadn't come back yet. The envelope, her envelope, was no longer in sight. She looked at the glass. People were walking by, glancing in. A woman in a skirt suit whispered something to a man in slacks, and both looked away when they caught Hailey's eye, like they didn't want to be caught looking at the trans girl in the glass box. That's what it felt like. Not a person. A problem. Her phone buzzed in her backpack. She yanked it out and saw a message light up the screen. "Dad, I'm on my way. Don't say anything until I get there. I love you." The words landed like a warm blanket, but Hailey was still shaking. She stared down at her fingers, pink polish chipped at the tips. She bit the side of her thumb, a habit she thought she'd outgrown last year. It came back when she got nervous. This was supposed to be a win. She had visualized this moment, walking in, handing over her savings, getting that receipt printed out with her name on it, her real name. The one she fought for in court, with her dad filling out endless forms and waiting through hours of appointments. The one she'd practiced writing in cursive until it flowed smooth like a ribbon. Hailey Morgan, not the old one, not the one kids at school still slipped up and used, not the one the teller had seen when she first looked up her record. That name was dead. But now it felt like the bank didn't care about court papers or ID cards. They looked at her and decided, not real, not honest, not trustworthy. Trans kids were used to that. Hailey wasn't even surprised, not fully, just tired. The door opened with a click. The manager stepped in again, followed by Maureen, the teller. They didn't look at her when they walked in. They looked through her. "Hailey," the manager said, like the word tasted funny in his mouth. "We've contacted your father. He said he's coming. He adjusted his tie again. But in the meantime, we do need to ask you a few questions." She didn't answer. She remembered what her dad always said when stuff like this happened. They can't twist what you don't say. Maureen shifted beside him, holding a folder in her hands. She opened it, tapped a sheet of paper. "Your account was opened 2 years ago, under a different name," she said, emphasizing the last word like it was something shameful. "The one you were assigned at birth." Hailey's stomach nodded. Maureen continued. "We weren't made aware of this update." "That's not true," Hailey said, her voice cutting through the room like a sudden gust of wind. "My dad came in last year with the paperwork. We both signed it. They made a new card. I've been using it. I got my allowance deposited last month." "Regardless," the manager said quickly, "you need to understand that our staff followed procedure when they saw discrepancies." "You mean when you saw a trans girl with money?" Hailey snapped. "That's what this is, right? You saw me, not the name, me. And you didn't think someone like me could have anything worth depositing." Silence. The clock ticked once, twice. The manager folded his hands. "Miss Morgan, this is not about your gender identity." "Really?" she asked, standing up. "Because you had no problem calling me sir when I sat down, and she pointed at Maureen, looked at my ID, and still asked if it was really me. Maureen bristled. Well, you look younger than your age, and with all the fraud these days, we have to be cautious. That's not caution, Hailey said. That's discrimination. She didn't cry. Not yet. But her throat felt like it was closing up. The door flew open before either of them could respond. A tall man in a navy coat stepped inside, eyes blazing. Douglas Morgan didn't yell. He never did. But when he walked into a room, people moved. Hailey, he said first, eyes only for her. She ran to him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. What's going on here? He asked the manager, voice flat and dangerous. We were just trying to verify a suspicious transaction. That suspicious transaction is my daughter's college savings, money she earned on her own. And the account she deposited into? It's hers. She's been a customer here longer than some of your staff. The manager straightened. Mr. Morgan, I understand you're upset. Oh, I'm not upset, Douglas said, letting go of Hailey just enough to step forward. I'm furious. You didn't just question her identity, you embarrassed her. You singled her out because she's transgender. Don't deny it. Maureen took a step back. The manager opened his mouth, then shut it. I'm not just her father, Douglas continued, eyes narrowing. I'm also one of the bank's majority stakeholders, and the only reason I haven't already called the press is because my daughter asked me not to. She wanted to see if you'd fix it first. Hailey's cheeks burned. But this time, it wasn't shame. It was pride. The silence in the room felt different now. Heavier. Douglas pulled out his wallet and placed his own ID next to Hailey's on the table. Now, return her envelope, print her receipt, and apologize. You owe her that. You owe every kid like her that. The manager swallowed hard. Hailey stood taller. For the first time since she walked in, she felt seen, not stared at, not judged. Just seen. And maybe, just maybe, they were finally starting to understand who she was. It had been 2 days since the bank incident, but Hailey still couldn't walk past Brickwell Bank without feeling her stomach tighten into knots. She stared at the building from across the street, arms folded, hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands. The same glass windows reflected the afternoon sun like nothing had happened, like the world had just moved on. But inside her, everything still felt cracked. Her father had tried to make things right. He called in meetings, issued complaints, filed a formal report with HR, despite already knowing most of the faces who ran the place. His tone had been calm, but she knew him well enough to see the fury behind his words. Douglas Morgan wasn't the kind of man who slammed doors or raised his voice, but he was the kind who moved money quietly, and when he moved it, people noticed. Hailey didn't want to be the reason heads rolled, but she also didn't want to be the reason everything stayed the same. She turned away from the bank and walked down the block, pulling her backpack tighter to her shoulders. Her sneakers scraped softly against the pavement as she passed a group of older women outside a coffee shop. One of them looked up, squinting, then leaned into her friend with a half-whispered, half-smirked. That's the Morgan kid. The boy who turned into a girl. Hailey didn't flinch, not this time. She kept walking. Because she wasn't the boy who turned into a girl. She was a girl. She always had been. They just didn't see it yet. And maybe they never would. By the time she made it to school, the air had shifted, not with weather, but with awareness. She was no stranger to being the topic of whispers. Even before the bank thing, people had always looked at her like she was a math problem they couldn't quite solve. Some teachers tried too hard to be overly supportive, like every quiz she passed was a milestone. Others ignored her entirely, afraid of saying the wrong thing. Today, though, there was something different in the way people turned their heads as she walked by. A quiet stir. Like something had cracked open. In homeroom, Casey slid into the desk beside her, blowing a bubble with her gum before popping it with a snap. Is it true, she asked, you made that bank manager cry? Hailey blinked. What? No, he didn't cry. Yeah, well, everyone's saying he's on suspension, and that your dad threatened to shut the bank down. He didn't, Hailey muttered, tugging at the zipper of her hoodie. Well, you should have, Casey said, eyes gleaming. You're like a total icon now, seriously. It's all over that local town forum. Someone posted a photo of you in the bank, like mid-speech. You looked fierce. Hailey's heart skipped. They'd taken pictures? She didn't remember anyone with a phone out. Then again, when she stood up to the manager and Maureen, she hadn't been thinking about anything except breathing. Another student, a boy named Kellen from 2 rows behind, leaned forward. Hey, Hailey, he said, that was cool what you did. I mean, it sucks that happened, but you kind of schooled them. Hailey nodded, unsure of how to respond. She hadn't meant to start anything, not really. But now there was a buzz in the air, a slow, cautious current of respect. But with it came something colder, too. At lunch, she passed by a table near the vending machines where a group of kids she used to hang out with sat. Brandon, one of them, lowered his voice, but not enough to keep her from hearing. She thinks being trans makes her untouchable now, like she can just accuse anyone of being transphobic and get him fired. Hailey paused mid-step. He wasn't talking to her, but he wanted her to hear. She turned slightly, eyes locking with his for just a moment. I don't think I'm untouchable, she said quietly, but I won't let anyone touch who I am either. Brandon rolled his eyes and looked away, but the rest of the table stayed quiet. Later that day, the school counselor called her in. Miss Elridge, mid-40s with a soft voice and a rainbow pin on her lapel, offered Hailey a seat across from her desk. On the table between them sat a copy of The Advocate, a pamphlet titled Know Your Rights at School, and a tiny bowl of half-melted mints. I heard about what happened at the bank, she said, folding her hands together. How are you holding up? Hailey hesitated. Fine. You don't have to be. I'm used to it, Hailey said. That's exactly the problem, Ms. Elridge replied gently. You shouldn't have to be. She leaned forward slightly. I know it's exhausting, being expected to educate people while also defending yourself, especially when you're just trying to exist. I want you to know you're not alone here. Hailey nodded, throat tight. I also spoke with your dad, Miss Elridge continued. He told me the bank plans to issue a public apology and that you've been invited to speak at their community meeting this Friday. Only if you want to. Hailey blinked. Speak? Like, what? Give a speech? You'd have the mic, you could share your story, your experience, or say nothing. It's up to you. Hailey looked down at her hands, her fingers were trembling again. The idea of standing in front of a crowd made her stomach twist, but the idea of staying silent, that was worse. Because if she didn't speak, someone else might. Someone who'd twist it, soften it, turn it into a lesson about miscommunication instead of what it really was, transphobia wrapped in customer service protocol. She left the counselor's office with her heart pounding. That night, as she sat on her bedroom floor surrounded by crumpled sheets of paper, Hailey stared at the one sentence she kept writing over and over. I am not a mistake. I am not a phase. I am not a threat. The words were starting to feel more like armor than just letters. She wasn't just Hailey Morgan, the girl who stood up at the bank. She was Hailey Morgan, the trans girl who made people listen. And this time she wasn't walking into glass walls. She was breaking them. Friday came faster than Hailey expected. The morning dragged with the weight of what was ahead, and yet the hours slipped by like sand through her fingers. Every part of her routine felt slightly off. Her cereal too soggy, her hoodie too warm, her shoelaces not quite tight enough. She stared at her reflection in the mirror before school, brushing her hair out of her eyes and wondering if her voice would shake when the microphone hit her lips. Her dad had offered to write the speech for her, or at least help. But she'd said no. If she was going to speak, it had to come from her, not as the daughter of Douglas Morgan, not as the bank executive's kid, but as herself, Hailey Morgan, a 13-year-old white transgender girl who didn't ask to be an example but refused to be anyone's punching bag. All day at school, people treated her differently, not in a bad way, just careful, like they weren't sure if they should say something supportive or say nothing at all. Casey gave her a thumbs up in the hallway, and a quiet nod from Mr. Benfield, her English teacher, felt more powerful than words. Even Brandon didn't say anything snide that day. Maybe someone had finally told him to shut up. Or maybe, for once, he'd realized she wasn't the one to mess with. By the time the sun dipped low in the sky, Hailey sat in the back seat of her dad's car, clutching her note card so tight the corners bent under her fingertips. The folder in her lap had a copy of her speech printed out, but she barely looked at it. The words were already burned into her brain. She hadn't written anything long, just enough to make her voice count. Her dad parked behind the bank building next to a row of expensive black sedans and one news van with a blurry logo on the side. He turned to her before getting out, his voice low but certain. "You don't have to impress anyone," he said. "Just be honest. That's more than enough." Hailey nodded. Her throat was dry. Her heart pounded so loud she thought it might echo through the parking lot. Inside the bank's community room, it looked like someone had tried to make the space feel welcoming. A rainbow flag stood in one corner, draped over a table of juice bottles and stale cookies. A banner read, "Open Doors, Open Minds," in bold, too-perfect font. Rows of chairs faced a small podium with a microphone. She could see some of the tellers, their eyes flicking up as she entered. Maureen wasn't one of them. Neither was the branch manager. That was fine. She didn't need them here to know she wasn't small anymore. People filled the room slowly, bank staff, a few customers, one reporter with a notepad. Some folks from the town LGBTQ+ Alliance were here too, an older lesbian couple with matching pins, a trans college student with neon blue hair and a fierce smile who gave Hailey a quiet nod. That one meant the most. When they called her name, Hailey's knees almost buckled, but she stood, walked, stepped behind the mic like she'd done it 1,000 times, and for a moment the room disappeared. She could feel every breath in her lungs. She looked out at the faces, not just those in the chairs, but the ones that lived in her memory. The woman outside the coffee shop who whispered, the boy in the cafeteria who said her name like a joke, the teller who saw her ID and still didn't believe her. She looked them all in the eye, even if they weren't here. Then she spoke. "My name is Hailey Morgan. I'm 13 years old. I'm white. I'm a girl, and I'm also transgender." That word hung in the air for a beat. "I'm not confused. I'm not in a phase, and I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm exactly who I say I am." She held the mic tighter. "Last week I walked into this bank with $5,000 I'd earned tutoring and winning a writing scholarship. I came to deposit it into my own savings account. Instead, I was pulled aside, questioned, treated like a criminal, because someone looked at me and decided I couldn't possibly be telling the truth. That someone like me couldn't possibly have money or responsibility or goals." She paused. "I wasn't embarrassed that day because I'm trans. I was embarrassed because grown adults didn't treat me like a person. They treated me like a problem. And the worst part is, I'm not surprised. I've felt that before, in school, in bathrooms, even in places that say they're safe." Hailey looked down for a second. Her fingers trembled. "But I didn't come here to make anyone feel guilty," she said, raising her eyes again. "I came here because I want things to change, not just for me, for the next kid who walks in with her head held high and her name legally changed and her pronouns correct, and still gets treated like she doesn't belong." The silence was so thick, it felt like no one was even breathing. "I'm not going to apologize for being transgender," she finished, "and you shouldn't be scared of people like me. You should be scared of what happens when we stop staying quiet." The applause didn't explode. It started with one pair of hands, then another. Then the whole room rose, the clapping rising like thunder in her chest. Her dad had tears in his eyes when she stepped down. He didn't say anything, just hugged her so tight she thought she might melt into his coat. The bank's head of regional operations took the mic next. She was the only one from corporate brave enough to show up. Her voice wavered as she read the formal apology, her words full of phrases like systemic change and inclusive training. Hailey listened, but part of her had already moved on. Because the most important thing hadn't come from them. It had come from her. And somewhere in the back row, the girl with blue hair gave her a slow clap and mouthed the word, legend. Hailey didn't feel like a legend. She just felt real. Finally, the next morning, the world looked a little different, even if the sky was the same and the birds still chirped like they didn't care what happened yesterday. Hailey lay on her bed, legs stretched out, her phone buzzing beside her like it was trying to keep up with everything she'd missed overnight. She blinked at the screen. 23 missed texts, 5 new voicemails, and more social media notifications than she'd ever seen in her life. She sat up slowly, pulling her comforter off like peeling away a layer of old skin. Her name was everywhere. Not just in the town forum or the school group chat. There were tweets from strangers saying things like, "This 13-year-old trans girl just dragged a whole bank and did it with class." Clips from her speech had gone viral. One video had nearly 500,000 views. Her voice, her small, nervous, cracking voice, was now echoing around the internet like it had punched a hole through the silence. She scrolled, heart thudding. There were mean comments, of course, some saying her dad forced her into it, some calling her slurs. One post said, "Another privileged white kid using trans identity for clout." That one stung, because Hailey was white, and she did have a dad who owned a bank. She knew she had privilege, but that didn't mean what happened to her wasn't real. That didn't mean she hadn't been humiliated just because of who she was. She tapped out of the app and tossed the phone on her pillow. Her chest felt tight. It was strange, being celebrated and hated at the same time. Downstairs, her dad was on the phone in the kitchen, voice low but urgent. She could hear parts of the conversation as she padded down the hall, barefoot. "I don't care what PR thinks. She deserves a seat at that meeting," he said. "If the Diversity Council is real, it needs to include trans youth. Yes, even if she's 13. There was a pause. Then, "She's not just my daughter. She's the reason we're even having this conversation." Hailey stood by the staircase, hand resting on the railing. She felt warm and cold at once. Her dad saw her, and his face softened instantly. He motioned that he'd call back, then ended the call. "You okay?" he asked. She shrugged. "I guess." "You don't have to read the comments. You don't owe anyone anything." She nodded, but didn't say anything right away. Instead, she walked over to the fridge, poured herself a glass of orange juice, and leaned against the counter. "I don't get it," she said after a minute. "How can people call me brave and disgusting in the same sentence?" Her dad leaned on the other side of the island, arms folded. "Because they're still deciding which one scares them more." Hailey stared down at her juice. "Do you think I did the right thing?" she asked. "I think you did the thing," he said. "The one that needed to be done, whether it was easy or not, whether it changes everything or just makes people think harder for 5 minutes. That's still enough." Hailey wanted to believe that. Later that day, the school principal asked her to stop by the office, not because she was in trouble, but because they wanted her voice included in the district's upcoming inclusion policy review. The district, Hailey almost laughed. She was 13 and already being asked to help rewrite grown-ups' rules. Principal Gomez handed her a folder filled with old policies, dress codes, bathroom access, preferred name usage. She said the district was reevaluating the language and that Hailey's lived experience as a transgender student would be invaluable. Hailey didn't say it out loud, but part of her thought, why wasn't my experience valuable before the bank thing went viral? Still, she took the folder. Read every page, marked it up with red pen like it was homework, because if she was going to be part of this, she was going to do it right. The following week, an email arrived addressed to her from the city's LGBTQ+ youth initiative. It invited her to join their advisory board, a group of teen representatives from different schools across the county. She read the message twice, then a third time, then sat down and cried, quietly, into her hands. Not because she was sad, but because for the first time, her transness didn't feel like a barrier. It felt like a bridge. At school, things didn't magically become perfect. Brandon still avoided her in the hall. A few kids made side comments under their breath when she passed by, but others stepped up. Casey walked with her to class more often. One boy in her science class, who'd never spoken to her before, passed her a note that read, "I'm not out yet, but thank you for being brave." She kept that note in her pencil case. The media attention faded eventually, like all viral things do. The town stopped buzzing, the reporters stopped calling. But something real had shifted. Hailey could feel it. In civics class, when the teacher asked for volunteers to lead the mock trial project, Hailey raised her hand. Not because she wanted the spotlight, but because she wasn't afraid of being seen anymore. Not afraid of the stares, or the whispers, or the questions that came laced in sugar but soaked in doubt. She was done shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. She was Hailey Morgan. Trans girl, young girl, loud girl, and whether the world was ready or not, she had a place in it. Not just inside the bank, not just behind the microphone, but everywhere. Spring sunlight filtered through the windows of Brickwell Bank, catching the dust in the air and making everything look softer than usual. It was warm outside, the kind of warm that hinted summer was close, but not quite here. The bank was quieter than usual, and the line moved fast. No angry customers, no loud sighs, just calm, steady motion. A few familiar tellers chatted behind the counters, and one of them, Mrs. Carter, the kind older woman with the silver bun, looked up from her station and smiled. Hailey stood by the door, not as a customer this time, but as a guest. Her fingers clutched the straps of her backpack, the same one she'd worn the day everything had gone wrong. Only now, it didn't feel like armor. It just felt like hers. The branch had invited her back, not for money, not for media, but to see something, to be part of something. Her dad stood beside her, his phone tucked away, his suit jacket folded over his arm. No one had asked him to dress up for this, and he hadn't. This wasn't his moment. It was hers. One of the executives from the regional office walked out from a back hallway, smiling like she was trying not to overdo it. "Ready?" she asked. Hailey nodded. They led her through the main lobby, past the ATMs and counters, and into the newly renovated customer lounge that had been turned into a small community space. A bulletin board with resources, flyers for youth groups, LGBTQ+ helplines, local scholarships. There was even a free bookshelf. And right above it, mounted on the freshly painted wall, was a bronze plaque. Hailey stepped closer, eyes widening just a little. The words etched into the metal gleamed under the lights. The Hailey Morgan Youth Empowerment Corner, a space dedicated to the courage of young people who refuse to be silenced. Her mouth opened slightly, but the words didn't come out at first. Her dad put a hand on her shoulder, gently. They wanted to name it after someone who made a difference, someone who showed them how much they still had to learn. Hailey blinked up at him, trying not to cry. They didn't have to. They didn't, he agreed, but they chose to. The room stayed quiet for a few moments. Just the soft hum of the lights and the quiet shuffle of a customer's shoes outside the glass doors. Hailey stared at the plaque. It felt heavy, but in a good way, like something real, something earned. A small group of students from her school were expected to visit later that afternoon for a financial literacy workshop hosted by the bank. Hailey had volunteered to help plan it, She hadn't told many people that part yet. It wasn't about being noticed now. It was about being useful. She ran her fingers along the edge of the bookshelf. A row of new paperbacks lined the middle shelf. Books with queer leads, trans stories, coming-of-age narratives that didn't end in tragedy, stories that felt like hope. Her eyes caught a laminated flyer pinned just below the shelf. At the top it read, "Names matter, pronouns matter, people matter." Below it, a small quote she recognized from her own speech. "I'm not going to apologize for being transgender, and you shouldn't be scared of people like me." A breath caught in her throat. It didn't feel like pride, exactly. It felt like peace. The kind of peace that came from knowing you weren't invisible anymore. Later that week, during dinner, her dad set down his fork and said, "Got a call from the Fair Banking Alliance. They want you to speak on their teen panel." Hailey blinked. "Like, in person?" "Nope, Zoom," he said with a grin. "But a real panel, national, other LGBTQ+ youth leaders. You'd be representing this region." Hailey stared down at her mashed potatoes for a long second. Then quietly she said, "Okay, I'll do it." She didn't need to think about it anymore. The girl who once trembled when someone questioned her name now answered without blinking. 2 weeks later, her panel aired. She was the youngest one on the screen, but when it ended, her inbox filled with messages. A trans boy from Arizona wrote, "I saw myself in you." A non-binary student from Illinois messaged, "I've never heard someone say those things out loud before. I didn't know I could say them too." Hailey read them all. She responded to every single one. And one night, long after the messages slowed down and life began to feel normal again, she pulled out the receipt from that first bank visit, the one that started it all. She had asked to keep it, and they'd given it to her after everything was sorted out. It was just a small slip of paper. But right there at the top, in bold black letters, it read, "Hailey Morgan, savings account." Not her old name, not someone else's name. Her name, the one she chose, the one she lived. And just beneath that, the balance. Now just a little higher after her latest tutoring payment, sat like a quiet reminder that she was building something. A future, a story, a truth no one could take from her. Hailey tucked the receipt back into the pocket of her journal. She flipped to a blank page and began to write. Not a speech, not a post, not a statement, just a story. Her story. She wasn't writing it for attention. She wasn't writing it to go viral. She was writing it because she could. Because her voice, once cracked and cautious, now moved like steady ink across the page. And she knew that somewhere another kid, maybe scared, maybe hiding, maybe just learning who they are, would read it someday and see themselves and know they weren't alone.